Peace and blessings, everyone. Salam. This is Rayesa Gheewala, certified high performance coach, and I support stressed out, overwhelmed, high achieving, overworked professional working moms to have serenity, balance, and a life of abundance. How's everyone doing today? I am dressed in my warm winter coat because it's actually really, really cold here. Thank God we had the sun out, so you can see peeking out in the background right there. I'm trying to sit into the sun as much as I possibly can, but we're going through a little chilly spell here in LA, and I love to be outside, so I'm out here with my coat. Hey, assalamu alaikum, Mawish, Madia, good to see you guys. Welcome, thank you for joining. Let me know where you're joining in from. I'd love to hear where you're connecting from. And I'm going to be talking about something that a lot of people talk about. We're talking about divorce, right? It's that D word that some people don't like to talk about, but you know what? It's, hey Madia, walaikum salam. It's a topic that is so important because it's a reality, right? It's happening every day in our community, you know, around the world, and it's happening for Muslims. Hey Omar, assalamu alaikum. Hey, how's it in Ireland? Very cold, I know. I know. We're usually pretty warm here, but it's gotten a little bit chilly, but I'm not complaining. It's still, we have the sun and the sunshine, so that's awesome. Thank you for tuning in. And, you know, it's things that people don't like to talk about because maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's taboo, maybe, you know, nobody wants to know that maybe it's on their mind. They don't want people to know it's on their mind. But, you know, it's not a hypothetical. It's real. It's reality. And a lot of people are facing divorce, whether they're deciding whether to stay or to leave, how to make that decision, what's the right decision for them. And there's so many factors at play, right? But, and, you know, coming from a place in society, coming from family, you know, familial culture, societal culture, and then there's even religion, you know, there's even like, you know, what does God think about this? And, you know, it's not encouraged, and nobody plans to get divorced when they get married. Nobody plans on going through it, but sometimes life happens. Hey Gail, thanks for joining. Hey Sadia, assalamu alaikum, thanks for joining. But you know what? Life happens, right? So sometimes you have to make a choice whether you need to get divorced. You know what? Nobody even really wants to. It's like you're in a situation where, you know, nobody wants to break up their family unless you're in a situation where it's not healthy, whether it's emotionally or physically or spiritually. And, you know, I didn't realize that before I went through my own divorce. Actually, I was in a place of that my marriage for me wasn't a good place for me in terms of my spiritual health and my spiritual connection to Allah. And I was drowning in that in my marriage, but yet it wasn't a decision that I made to end the marriage, to get divorced. And I found myself in a situation where things were just happening, and I guess maybe I wasn't conscious, or I was kind of going along with the flow, because at that time in my life I didn't know how to make decisions that were right for me, right? How do we, you know, a decision like divorce is such a big entity, and it's a huge, major life change, right? So how can you come to a decision that is right for you where you don't feel guilty or bad about it because it's the right thing to do, right? There's so many factors to consider: your family, you know, your children if you have children, you know, your spiritual connection to God, what society is going to say, and all these things that come into mind when our mind is so cluttered in what is everyone else going to say. It gets really confusing on how to make that decision. But you know what comes along with you know, and everybody has their own answers for their life and the decisions that they need to make in their life within themselves. If you quiet down the mind, and you can really listen to what your heart is saying. And then the trust factor comes in, right? Trusting and knowing you're making the right decision for yourself, not knowing what the outcome is, because none of us know what the outcome is going to be, right? So there's so many factors that go into play, and a lot of times people stay in a marriage where they shouldn't, in terms of if it's not healthy for you, in terms of your mental or physical or spiritual health. If you're experiencing abuse, right? There's no one says that you need to stay in a marriage that's abusive, but still, sometimes we find that there's situations that people do stay in a marriage. You know, I wanted to stay in my marriage, even though I couldn't see it at the time. You know, I was willing to really make it work at all costs, right? And to exhaust all possibilities, which I think is important, but you have to know where your limits are. You have to know like what your priorities are in terms of like what are your negotiables, what are your non-negotiables, you know, where can you bend and compromise and where you can't. And I was even willing to, sacrifice my spiritual health. Yeah, and I was willing to sacrifice my connection to God for that, because I felt like that was the only way for me. Yes, Gail, we do the best that we can. We try to make things work as long as we can until we just can't anymore, right? Everybody has limits, and it's so important to know what they are for yourself. And I can now, almost 4 years later, look back and say to myself, this was a really good choice that I found that I didn't really feel like I made the choice. I felt like I was put in the situation, and now I had to accept. And now I had to deal with what was happening in my life, meaning the end of my marriage and a divorce. And that was the hardest part, is when you have to accept something that you don't want, right? You have to submit, you have to let go. And what comes along with that? Fear, blame, shame. What are people going to think? Is my life ever going to be the same? How are my kids going to turn out? All these decisions, and all of this stuff fills your mind with fear and uncertainty. And it's a scary place to be, and it's definitely a lonely place to be. There's so many people who go through this alone. And hey, Zahra, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gail. It does feel like a failure because you tried your best. You did everything you could. And isn't that the case? I mean, we're talking about divorce here, but in anything, when you try your best and it doesn't work out the way you anticipated, it doesn't work out the way you had planned, it feels like a total failure. But we have to remember in those situations that we're not in charge of the outcome. We're in charge of the effort that you put in. We're in charge of our intention and how we show up and our effort. But we're not in charge of the outcome or how it turns out. And, I can say that now, healed and whole and healthy and on a totally different path than I was when I was married. And I can see how me as an individual, as a soul, as a servant of God, was a very different person. I didn't identify myself that way when I was in my marriage. I just identified myself as someone else's wife or someone's mother. And first and foremost, each one of us is an individual, is a soul, is a human being. Yeah, totally true. When you feel like what? Want to have ice cream? Okay. That was my daughter. She has a friend over and she wants to have some ice cream now. So I guess they're having ice cream. So yeah, like where was I? It's so important for us. There's so many things that you can take away from, as a Muslim woman, a lot of times we feel, or I know, like I felt really blessed. I think because I had so much support. First and foremost, I had the support of God. And with that came along so many blessings in my life, of people who came into my life to help me and to support me. But, I had to reach out for that as well, because there's so much shame and there's so much blame and feeling like a failure and feeling like, your life is never going to be the same. It's feeling like you're in this situation, and why me, why now, and what am I supposed to do with it? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to deal with it? And I found that the thing that I believe that God was trying to teach me is that all I needed was him, really, to go forward in my life, to take initiative, to have courage, to have conviction, to take the steps. And I was always really dependent on someone else, on another person, and feeling like I couldn't do things without other people's validation. Hey Rina, hey Farah, Aisha, Karam, Yannick, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. Peace and blessings to you all. And it's so important for us not to be isolated. Like whatever you're going through, I mean, divorce is huge because women are already feeling isolated. They're feeling alone. They're feeling to blame. And I think women feel that way more than men. I mean, I can only speak from a female's perspective and people that I know who are divorced. But, you know, I'm sure there's some level of it for men as well. But, you know, feeling like you're on the spotlight and people are, you know, people are always going to say things and talk. But that's, you know, what I learned is that that's really none of our business or what other people say, right? Yeah, you know, and yeah, you know, but the thing is that, you know, when we realized we were in a bad situation and the best thing was coming out, isn't that a blessing though? To know that, like for me, I know I wanted something so bad. I wanted this marriage to work so bad, and I wanted for it to work, just like any married people want their marriage and their relationship to work. But at what cost, right? At what cost? Is it at the cost of your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your spiritual health? You know, what is the cost? And I'm sure, Zahra, that there are things that you learned from that relationship. You're in a better place now, but I'm sure there's things that you learned from that relationship and that experience that has grown you and has made you stronger in who you are today to help you in going forward in your next relationship or in any life experience that comes your way now, because you have an experience that you've learned from, you have growth. But along with the growth and the experience comes the pain, right? The pain of feeling like a failure, the pain of feeling alone, the pain of feeling like where's my life headed? You know, when we get married, we have this definition of what life is going to be like. We have expectations, and sometimes they are met, and sometimes they're not met. And then when you have an end of a marriage, it's a loss. There's grief. It's a death of hopes and dreams and expectations, and a death of a relationship. You know, whether it's amicable or not is a whole nother story. But yeah, sweetie, I'm sure you did. But each person, especially as a woman, you have to process all that grief, that loss, that end of a life of dreams and hopes that you had in building a foundation with another person and building a family and, a legacy with that person. And that requires healing, that requires support. And a lot of times, you know, Muslim women, they feel like they have nowhere to turn. They feel like people don't understand them, or people do not want to be around them because they're contagious, right? Their divorce is contagious. And people have limiting beliefs like that. And, you know, then they feel ostracized, and then they feel like their kids become ostracized. Yeah. Well, I love that, Gail. You feel so much happier now that you're on your own and nobody's controlling you, and you're so much stronger. Well, that's so true. You know, in my marriage, I was very much controlled because I allowed that, because I didn't know any other way. That was safety for me. That was safe for me to be controlled, and I didn't see it as control. But now, as a very different person, I can see, you know, that I have autonomy in how I think. I know how to think for myself and how to make decisions for myself and feel comfortable and have clarity and be confident in that. Yeah, Zahra, good for you, you know. And And I think to myself that had I stayed in that marriage, I would have gone down that path, or maybe even worse, right? Or maybe for my spiritual health, it would have been a bad situation for me and my soul. And that's so much more important. What is going to happen to me in eternity? What's going to happen to me in the next life? What's going to happen to my soul? And at the end of the day, when we're going through the struggle, we can't see the big picture of life, or the forest for the trees, right? We just see the pain here and now, and the devastation and the disappointment and the hurt. And that makes you want to retreat, and that makes you want to go inward. So, I think there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time to go inward and heal yourself, but there's also a time for reaching out for support, because it's our responsibility as Muslim sisters to look out for each other and to help each other and support each other. But there's a certain level, right? Because you can't help someone if you don't know they're struggling, and it's really our own personal responsibility to reach out and to ask for help. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There is absolutely no shame or blame in asking for help. You know why? Because that's a characteristic of being human, is asking for help. And what I learned from my divorce is that being needy is normal, is a human characteristic, but who are we needy with? Who are we reliant on? Who are we dependent on? And when you make that first and foremost God, then, that is the source. Whereas everyone else, the resources, the people, is the means. And that is the source to get the means, right? So in my past, before when I was married, I used to actually reach out to the means as the source. And I thought, this was it. This person can help me with this. This person can help me with that. And I forgot to go to the source first. So there was a lot of pain in there. Assalamualaikum, Naintara. Love you too. Hey, Jessica. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. So I wanted to really hop on here and just talk about the pain and the blame and the shame and the, even regret. It's like, you can compare the divorce as a loss, right? As a grief. And there are 7 stages of grief, of denial and anger and upset and resentment, and then healing and processing. I don't know them all by heart, but I was just kind of remembering on top of my head. And it's a process just like any other loss. When you have death, or you have cancer, or any type of loss that you're having, it's a processing of pain. And that's the same thing for divorce. When you are letting go, you have to let go of, to heal and to move forward, you have to let go of, take the good and leave the bad. Meaning, like, most people, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I know in my marriage, most of it was good until it wasn't anymore. So to be able to, when you've healed, you can take the good stuff, or I can take the good stuff and really appreciate and be grateful for that, and move forward in creating something new, right? That's another fear and another worry of Muslim women after their divorce. Like, is this it? Is this my life? Am I, just down to, am I going to be labeled as a divorced woman? Is that how I identified? Yeah, absolutely, Gail. That's so true. So important to put the kids first, right? And that's key. So how do we do that? How can we put our children first? If when we're going through a trauma or, a pain or a hurt, because kids internalize everything, and whether you're going through a divorce or not, they internalize everything and they feel like, they're responsible. And so what's the key for that? To put the children first. How do we do that? Hey, Madura, thank you for joining. Good to see you. So, one of the things I learned, and again, I was blessed to work with so many awesome coaches who have helped me and guided me and pushed me and challenged me in my own growth during this period in my time right after my divorce, was that I had to take excellent care of myself. Like, like self-care, gobs of self-care, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, all of that. And because I was able to do that, I was able to be as strong as I could for my children, right? Because if you're in a place of depression, of sadness, of grief, of anger, that's all living inside of you. And that's part of the process too, right? We go through that. And I remember, I did experience those things: sadness, anger, grief, resentment, bitterness. I did have those periods, but I remember like having to hold it together while my kids were with me. And, I'm so blessed to have awesome, amazing friends who were there supporting me, and my family. My family would be available to me, even though they don't live here, supporting me and helping me. But what happens when we're stressed? What happens when we're carrying any type of mental load, emotional load, any type of stress, right? We lose it. We snap, we yell, we become short. And where does that go? It lands on the most innocent and the most young. It's like our kids are an easy target, right? And then they feel like they're responsible for our feelings, where no one's responsible for our own individual feelings except us. Yeah. Maria, you want me to bring them on camera? They're inside playing. You want me to bring the kids on camera? Oh yeah, how did I strong all the time? Sometimes I ask myself that, like, how I got through this and how did I get to the other side? And I'm going to be writing a book about that, inshallah. But that has been my journey. I feel like my awakening is that because I put everything, all my faith and all my trust, all my hopes, all my dreams, all my pain, my everything into my relationship with God, that's where I got it from. Because you think about it, it's like human beings have a certain capacity, right? To love, to share, to give, to help. And that's it. Like, each one of us is human, so we all have that same capacity, right? But when you invest and you connect to that relationship with God, like, anything is possible. Like, there are no limits. There are no boundaries. Hey, Farina. Assalamu alaikum, good to see you. Hey, Sadia, my long lost friend. So good to see you. Assalamu alaikum, Sana. Nice to see you. Yeah, so that was what changed for me. And look at that, I was taken out of my marriage and put on another path. And it was because I needed to learn something. I needed to grow in a certain way. And what I needed to learn was that, when we rely on people for all our needs, and we almost become a burden for them, because no one is meant to carry you. Like, you have to carry your own self. And how can you carry yourself? Where do you get your strength from? Where do you get your resilience from? Like, it's already innate. Our resilience, we have it within us. And there's ways to access that. And it all comes from our connection to our Creator. And then once I started tapping into that and going there for everything, people started coming into my life, resources started coming into my life, and like effortlessly. And that's the thing. It's that Allah wants us to be needy and dependent on Him. And the more we are, the more our needs get taken care of. And that's one of the things I learned. Is this helpful for you guys? Is this, is this resonating, or are you resonating with this, or is this helpful for you? Do you want to hear more? Is there anything else that you want to know? Ask me anything you want and I will share. Ask me anything you want to know about marriage or about divorce or about going through difficult times. Hey, Alexandra. Good to see you. Are you in California? I'm here in LA, but I wonder where you are. I wonder if you're here visiting or training. So, yeah, strength. You know what? Everyone has that within. Everyone has access to that, to build to inner resilience. We all have it. It's just a matter of tapping into it and using it. I think, what happens for so long is that we have so many cultural taboos, we have so many societal taboos, or, family taboos that, it's like no one encourages divorce. No one wants to get divorced. But it's like if you can't be a whole healthy person in a marriage, and you've tried everything you possibly can, you've taken the measures and the steps, you've reached out for help, it's not the end of the world. Because you think about it, look, in my situation, what was more important? Was it more important for me to compromise myself and my values and sell my soul to stay in that marriage? Or was it more important for me to, why am I here? What's my purpose? Why was I created? I wasn't created just to be a wife. I wasn't created just to be a mother, Yes, those are the roles that I play. But first and foremost, each one of us is a magnificent creation of God. And we start with that. We're an individual. We're a soul. We have a purpose. And those are the roles that we play. So, okay, what would I tell someone who is contemplating divorce? Married for a long time with kids, but is afraid to be on their own, financially, physically, emotionally. Yeah, isn't that real? That is so real. I mean, those are real fears, and because there's so much unknown. But making a decision whether to stay or to go from a place of fear is not truth. Because where are the fears coming from? The fears are coming from thoughts in the head. I don't know how I'm going to support myself. I don't know what's going to happen to my kids. I don't know how I'm going to survive. Like for me, I know that I didn't think I could breathe without, having my husband in my life. And that's how codependent I was. Financially, physically, emotionally, all of that stuff. Like I didn't know how to think for myself. I didn't know how to make decisions. And so it was like I needed that relationship to survive. And that's what I thought. And that's what I believed. And if somebody would have told me otherwise, I wouldn't have believed them. But I guess that's the blessing of our Creator, is that I was taken off that path and put on a path that I needed to go on. And hey, Assalamu alaikum. Sarah, good to see you. Hey, Mona, thank you for joining. So I would say is, when you need to make a decision, we need clarity. How do we gain clarity? We gain clarity by having a quiet mind and a little bit of silence to hear what the answers are that are coming, right? We all have the answers to ourselves for our own life, our own answers within. And that means, what is that? That means that our intuition, right? Our intuition speaks loud and clear, but a lot of times we don't want to hear it because our head gets in the way and squashes it because of all the fears that it comes up with. So I would say is to seek out somebody who can help them come up with their own answers. Because a lot of times you'll have, I know in my situation too, you'll have people say, no, you should do this and you should do this. And I this happened to me and that happened to me. Yes, you have to take advice from other people in terms of their expertise or their experience. But at the same time, what's right for you may not be right for someone else. And you can't take someone else's answer and apply it to yourself. For me, I know what happened for me is that I was in a place of such desperation that, I was violating myself. I was violating my soul. I was compromising myself. I mean, I was just willing to, make a deal with the devil to stay in this marriage. That's not my end goal. I wasn't created and put here on this earth to be in a marriage. That's not any of our end goals, And, okay, so where do we get our... I would say to that person is that number one is ask for divine help. Reach out to your creator, reach out to God and ask God to guide you. And then be willing to listen, and then seek out resources and support, and keep doing that. It's like rinse and repeat, and that never ends. And that's what I would say is the number one secret to being. It's not even a secret. I mean, the number one way to tap into how to live your life in a place of peace and contentment and feeling okay, because all the fear, all the blame, all the shame, all the desperation, it all comes from what other people are thinking, or standards that people and society have put on us and that we have taken on. But if you think about it, what is really most important, right? What is your gold standard? Is it important of what other people think of you, or is it important, what God thinks of you? So asking questions like that of yourself, it can really help you to gain clarity on how you're going to make decisions. There's so much I can say about this topic. And ask me some more questions. Ask me anything else that you want. What would be helpful? Whether you're in a marriage, whether you're divorced, or you're going through a divorce, or you're contemplating it. Ask me anything else. I'll share anything and everything. I'll be completely honest and truthful. I want to be able to help other people with what I went through, and I feel really blessed to be in a situation where I can help and I can support. And that's why we're here on this earth as human beings, to help and support each other. I'm funny. What's so funny? Let's see, where else? So I think, also this conversation is just about awareness. For me, when I was not divorced, when I was married, I had no idea what it was like for a divorced Muslim woman. Like, what goes through her mind? What is she worried about? What is she going through? How is she processing? Most of the time, a lot of us, and it wasn't intentional, most of the time, a lot of us are just in our own world and living our own day-to-day life, that we're not really maybe concerned, or other people's issues or problems or their reality is not on our radar. Yes, Nantara, you can ask me anything too. Yeah, my kids. Okay, so that's a great question. Well, I can't speak for them, because they have their own reality, but it was a shock for them. They have their own reality, but I don't know exactly how. I could say what I think, how I think they processed it and their experience, but I can never really say I can never really say this was their experience, because only someone else can tell you what their own experience is. So, okay, so for my kids, I know that it was definitely a shock, because I think, kind of like me, they were just always in this perfect life. And that's how a lot of people saw me. I had this perfect life, perfect marriage, perfect home, perfect kids, It's like that whole Bad Moms movie. Everything looks perfect from the outside, but inside is a boiling mess. And for my kids, they pretty much, they had a life that they were very cushioned in terms of security and family and safety. And so it was a shock for them. But again, even for my kids, I'm really grateful that they experienced a challenge. I don't wish a breakup of a marriage for anyone, or any child. But I am grateful that they did experience this, because it allowed them to know that, to tap into their own resilience as little humans, and to learn how to deal with difficult situations and challenges. Because a lot of times, as I was guilty of this as well, we try to protect our children from real life. We don't want them to get hurt emotionally or physically. We don't want them to go through hardship or experience struggle. But you know what? That's life. We cannot protect them from life. They're their own individual. They're their own soul. And they are here to experience their life and go on their own journey. And the reason why I say that it was helpful was because it gave them different perspective on life. It gave them a different way to know that they're okay, they're going to be okay, and even though they're struggling, you know, they have so many things to be grateful for, and that it's not always going to be like this. So they grew a lot from being either like, you know, naive or, you know, and you can say, you know what, children deserve to have a childhood where they're protected or coddled or just not exposed to difficulties and hardships. And I wouldn't say put hardships in your child's path on purpose, but you know, there's so many kids around the world that are going through such worse things, and you know, that's out of our hands. So we can't control what challenges and hardships come our way. We can just manage how we respond to them. And it was really hard, you know, because children process, that was the hardest part, is I wanted to be their rock. And the only way I could do that was to take excellent care of myself. And that required work. That required work on myself emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. Like, man, it was hard. It is hard work, you know, working on yourself. It's the hardest project you're going to ever do in your life. And that's why it's easier not to do it. It's easier to avoid and escape it. But you know, and what was hard was also knowing that even though I tried really hard, I couldn't protect them from pain or hurt. I could just be there for them, knowing that they have a soft place to land on, and that means, you know, with children, how do they handle things? Well, what happens with children, even with adults, but children is a different way. They act up. It comes out in their behavior because they're off track, because they're not feeling that connection or that safety and security they once had. Things are going chaotic, and that's why kids will only do as well as their parent is doing. If their parent is emotionally stable and secure, then they can be like, okay, you know what? Everything's chaos out there, but while I'm here and connected with my parent, okay, you know, we have some stability, you know, things are not where we want them to be, but it's that emotional safety and security is what is really important, that they can be melting down, or they could be yelling or screaming or acting out and, you know, throwing things or having a temper tantrum, and you know it's because they're not at peace inside. It's them showing you that, you know, I need help. I'm falling apart inside and I need help. And they're going to their safe space to show it, right? Especially with moms. Kids act up with moms the most because it's their safe zone. It's their safe space to release and to express and to show how they're really feeling. And how do they show how they're feeling is by how they act. Hey, Warda. Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you. Hey, Cindy. Thanks for joining. So, you know, it's been an up and down, and it's been an up and down. And the hardest thing, I think, that I had to learn, so hard for me, was that I kept thinking to myself, and I kept saying to myself, this pain and this hurt and this suffering that my kids are going through is because of me, or is my fault. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you. And that was what was hurting me, because I was blaming myself for what they were experiencing and going through, and I couldn't change it for them, right? But I knew that I couldn't take away their pain and their hurt. I could just support them and be there for them. And I think that is a huge, huge thing. Because think about it in your life. When you were young and you were little and things were falling apart for you internally, or you were going through a hard time, or going through something, a pain or a hurt, like, where did you go? Where did you take that? Where was your soft place to land? You know, where could you go and dump it all out and release everything all out? You know, in a safe space where you're not going to get yelled at because of your bad behavior or your tantrum or your, you know, I like to call it off-track behavior, right? Because look at us. Like, when we get upset or irritated or cranky, we yell, we snap, right? But is anyone yelling at us to say, stop that behavior, stop that yelling at your kids? No, right? But when they act up, we're very quick to say, well, don't take that tone with me, or don't speak like that, right? And that's an indicator to us something's wrong. They're disconnected. So it's an opportunity to connect with your child. But if you don't have the mental capacity to connect and to be that soft place where they're having a tantrum or yelling or screaming or, saying bad words or telling you that they hate you, it's not that they mean it. They're just not thinking properly because they're in a state of being emotionally triggered, or they're in a heightened emotional state because of their feelings. So, yeah, and even now, things have gotten a lot better, but even now, kids adapt and they learn based on your vibe. They are very, very observant, and they want to always keep the peace. They always want to take on the responsibility of managing the home and of the energy, because they feel like everything is their fault. So they feel like they're responsible for that, and they're not. We're the adults. We're responsible for that. We're responsible for our words. We're responsible for our actions. We're responsible for the energy we're putting into our homes. Our lightheartedness, our cheeriness, I remember at one point my son was telling me, "Hey Pamela, assalamu alaikum, good to see you." A few years back, my son said to me, "What's wrong, Mama? You always look like you're upset or you're worried." I'm like, "Oh, really?" Because I had so much on my mind that I always looked like that. and he took it as, "Are you mad at me?" So that's how they internalize it. "Oh, did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me because I'm looking like I'm really upset?" So that's what I mean about what we have, taking care of our mental health and our emotional health. What we have in our mind is how we're going to show up. And kids, they internalize it all, and they believe it's all about them because they want to please us so badly that they will, adjust their behavior to please us, whether it's hurts them or not. So I hope that answers your question and gives you a little bit of insight in, it's not the divorce, or it's not the, the loss or the death or the challenge that causes the pain or the hurt for the children. It is how their parents respond to it. Because, certain things we have no control over. Like, I had no control over this divorce. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. I tried to resist. And that could be another Facebook Live topic. What happens when you resist things in your life that are coming your way that, you cannot overthrow God's will, right? And what happens when you resist? And what happens when you accept and submit? And so, when we face loss or death or grief or challenges, how do we respond, right? What's our initial response? Can we respond with resilience and beautiful patience and going to the right place for the help that we need? Can we respond in a way where we're not hurting ourselves? Because so many times people go through, we're talking about divorce today, but there's so many people I've seen that it's so hard. And if it's hard, it's painful, it's not fun. Nobody wants to be in the situation. And there's many ways to deal with it. There's ways to deal with it by ignoring, by escaping, and there's many different things you can do. You can escape to Netflix land and binge all day. You can take drugs. You can do things that are not, you can drink alcohol. You can, what's the other thing that you can, do a lot of things that have very addictive properties, like online shopping, it's really just an escape to not feel what you're feeling. And in your loss, in your challenge, in your grief, it's an easy way to numb the feelings that are coming up, and it's an escape. But you know what? Once you have the high of the online shopping and then you crash, you got to face that reality again. You got to face the challenge, and there's no way, you could go through it and you can destroy yourself, or you can go through it and you can come out the other side stronger, more resilient, more content, more at peace. And there's so many things that I could say about it, and getting back to that question, Farhina, about what would I say to someone is that, look, Allah tells us in the Quran, like, He will find a way out for you. And do you believe that? You have to ask yourself, I had to ask myself that question. Do I believe Allah? What His promises are? We all believe, we all have faith. We all, believe in God and, believe in the Quran. But do we really believe Him? So it's a question to ask ourselves. And what does that look like? What is faith and belief, and what does that mean? How does that affect my actions? So is this what you guys want to hear? Is this helpful? Is this insightful? Let me know what you're thinking, and I'm here. Ask me any questions. Let me see what time it is. I do need to get back to the girls sometime soon here. Let me check my watch. Oh, wow. I think I've been talking for 45 minutes. I could talk about this all day long because, I've learned so much from my own experience that I have to share. I have to share it because no one should ever feel like they're alone. No one should, in anything, and we're talking about divorce today, but no one should ever feel like they're alone in their struggle, because they're not. We're not put on this earth to just be alone by ourselves in our own heads. And there's no shame and there's nothing wrong in asking for help. It does not signify weakness. It does not signify failure, right? Sometimes we feel, especially as moms and as women, we feel like we have to carry it all. We feel like we have this appearance to keep up and that we have to carry everything on our own. We can't ask for help. I've worked with so many moms that it's so hard for them to ask for help and then accept it and to receive it within, to allow it in. And that's one thing I learned too about self-care is that, I will ask for help and I will accept it graciously, with gratitude and appreciation, and then pay it back, and I don't mean pay it back in like a tit for tat. I mean, like, when I'm ready and able and capable, I'm going to pay it forward. So I hope that was helpful for you guys, and let me know what else you want to talk about. What else you want to talk about in terms of relationships, in terms of marriage, in terms of divorce, in terms of kids. There is life after divorce. I want you guys to know that. There's life, life is really, you create your reality as you think it. Meaning that there is hope. It's not like, being divorced is not the end of the world. It's not, where there's so many misconceptions culturally and in society, especially in the Muslim community, that, it's like you're done. It's like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. But, I think also as Muslims, we do know that it's not the worst thing that could happen to you, because the worst thing that could happen to you is that, you lose your connection to God, right? And then you're really lost. And it doesn't mean that there's no way back, but that would be the travesty. We're not, like I said, we're not created and put here on this earth just to be in a marriage. So there's so many things that we could talk about in terms of, on this topic, but just to know that in no way am I saying that, divorce is the way to go. But if you find yourself in that situation and you find yourself in a divorce, whether you wanted it or not, or whether you needed to get out of your marriage or not, it's okay. It's really okay. It's not the end of the world, even though it feels like it. It feels very real. But know you're not alone, and reach out for help. And remember to always go to the source first, which is our Creator. So thank you guys so much for joining and staying on and hanging out with me. And I'm going to go inside right now and see what the kids are doing. And my daughter and her friend who's over from school. And thank you so much for the hearts. I appreciate that. I feel all the love. And go back inside and warm up a little bit. And, get back into the mom role, right? Which a lot of us, have that. A lot of us know that. We're always, I'm going to leave you with this last thing, is that we're always Like, we play multiple roles. We have so many different hats that we wear. But remember, you're an individual first. You're a awesome, magnificent creation of God and a servant of God. And take care of yourself first. Because when you are at your best, when you are at your best and when you're showing up at your best, like, you're going to be serving and living and leading with abundance everywhere, overflowing abundance everywhere in your life. Hey, Khadija, I'm signing off now. Thank you so much for joining. I'm sorry I missed you. Gotta go. But yes, I think I had ice cream last night, so I'm going to have to pass on the ice cream today. But I'm going to go see what they're doing inside. Well, take care, everyone. Thanks for joining. So good to see you. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum.